Magic button.
The magic button. As always, I don't exactly have the countdown yet for when I hit the button and when we go live, but by this point we should be live. So
Yeah,
hello.
it looks like we just popped up.
Hello and welcome to the RPG Academy podcast, YouTube, Twitch stream thingy. I am Michael. You can find me on the Twitters at the RPG Academy. And tonight we are going to be doing faculty meeting 123, Lessons Learned from Video Games. With me tonight, I have a special guest co-host. We've been on very recently, so you should already know who he is. But in case you don't, this is Tanner, who is the GM of the Shadow of the Cabal podcast. Tanner, welcome back to a faculty meeting.
Thanks. It's great to be here. It's a fabulous evening, and I'm ready to get into the topics today. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. Some stuff I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, there are a ton of announcements, and you know, there's always a little bit of tang of guilt, because I know there's a lot of people who do care about a catacon, but of our listeners, most don't. So I do apologize. There will be some catacon talk here in a minute, but we have actually a couple other announcements we need to get to even before that. The first one, little bit of a dour note, but some of our regular listeners may have already noticed that the Caleb G himself, my usual co-host, has not been as active recently. If you weren't already aware, he recently got a new job, promotion. There's a lot more work, a lot more hours. And in addition, he and his wife are expecting their first waggling later this year, but early this year. So he's taking a sabbatical. He's faculty. He's going to take some time off and just not have to worry about the stress of when he can, when he can't. Going to take some time, get the job in line, get the kid going, and really hopefully it won't be that long before he's back. Though I will admit there is a bit of tang of remembering how Evan was only supposed to go away for a little while and 5 years later still gone. But I have confidence that Mr. Caleb G will come back, and I certainly wish him the best with a new job, and him and Tressa the best with the kid. I got two myself. I didn't think I would ever have kids. I said I would never have kids. I said I didn't want kids. Now that I have kids, I can't imagine life without them. But they do take up a lot of time.
Yeah. Good luck and congratulations, Caleb.
Fantastic. So some other more exciting news. We got some network news. Mostly these are just making things that probably people didn't even know were official. But we are expanding the network officially. We are bringing in the Lawful and Orderly podcast Twitch show, which is basically made up of already people on the faculty, which is why it probably is more of an official thing, you know. But
nepotism.
Exactly. But if you're not aware, this is the show that Andrew and Scott started. It's on Twitch Monday nights. It's a sort of a very loose improv freeform version of a police procedural set in a magical world of Land Arcanum. They are the Lawful and Orderly special victims unit or special visions unit. That's right, because they have they can see into the future type of thing. It's a great show. It's a lot of fun. So they are officially now a part of the network with all the rights and responsibilities therein, which is not much.
We get rights?
More responsibilities. The rights are zero. The responsibilities are many. I think that's how that works.
Gotcha.
And then also Gamerstable. Eric and his sort of offshoot Openly Gamer Theater has been a part of the network for several years now. With the return of Gamerstable, we are going to absorb them into the network as well. So Eric et al. And all the 14 people who are normally on that show are all now officially part of the network and faculty here. And hopefully we will continue to see more and more crossover with all our various shows. And we do have a couple other shows and sites that we are still looking at evaluating. But I don't know right now if we have anything close, but there are some things we're looking at. So
sure, yeah.
Anything from you before I get to the other stuff that no one cares about?
Yeah, I think you already know about this. We talked about it privately, but this is a little exciting. We have recorded the finale of our campaign for Shadow of the Cabal. Yeah, it is coming very soon, probably sooner than everybody imagined. But I don't want to get into details about it, but this isn't going to be the end of our show, obviously. We're going to be picking up some new games over the summer and launching into a new campaign in L5R in the fall, probably. But we are going to be sort of wrapping up our story pretty quick here. And I think it's just been awesome. I mean, I think it's been close to a little bit over a year since we started the show, and it's just been such an awesome ride, and getting to meet so many cool people in the RPG Academy and fans and patrons and stuff. So I'm really excited. I used to be one of those people who would fast forward through all the Acadecon talk when I listened to the RPG Academy. I'm like, who cares? I'm not going to this. Yeah. Now I'm pumped for it. So it can happen to you too, listener.
That is right. And it's funny, I have recently been going back and re-listening to all of our old original Dungeon Talks, which then became table topics, which are now faculty meetings. For reasons, I've been going back and listening to all of them and kind of doing some almost like a play-by-play, like on Twitter. Like if something is interesting or is like, oh, that's the first time this person's been part of the show. It happens a lot that people who have written into the show end up being on the show.
Yeah.
Matthew sent in a couple emails. He's now part of the faculty. Caleb, he contacted me out of the blue one day, said like, hey, can I write some articles for your site? I do D&D stuff and I don't have anywhere to post. I'm like, okay. He became the co-host and just on and on and on. Andrew was one of the first people who sent us in questions, and that was years later, but he's now part of the faculty as well. So if you like a podcast, email them.
Yeah, and you know what? If they're the size that we are, you have a good chance of making it on one day. Like our good friend Amelia, who is now going to be joining the show, she started out as a fan, and then we met up with her at a Catacon, played games and stuff, and said, "Hey, you want to come on and do this with us?" She said, "Yeah." So it's just that easy. Just pester them until they let you on.
That's right.
Yeah.
A little quick apology. I'm still getting over a cold. I actually missed work today. I wasn't feeling well, so I may be doing that a lot. And I've redecorated. You may notice that my tapestry is hanging a little bit more straight than it has been. Everything has been redesigned, but unfortunately my control panel is now just out of reach. So for me to lean over and to hit mute before I cough is a little bit more awkward now.
Yeah.
So I may just turn away from the microphone.
I haven't rearranged. You can still see my pile of board games and card games and dice right there. So next time I come on, I'll have a green screen set up and everything. I'll be ready to rock and roll. Yeah.
Nice. So one other announcement before we get to the Catacon stuff, and then I'll try to get through it as quickly as I can, though there is a lot of it. The GM Masterclass continues to come out. There will be 8 episodes. The 5th episode came out this week. The last episode is a 2-hour oversized spectacular. I looked at cutting it, and I don't think it needs cut. I think it all is part of the same conversation. But once it comes out, Jim and I want to do a live Q&A and give people who listen a chance to ask us questions, follow up, or whatever. So we're going to wait 2 weeks after the last one airs to give people time to catch up. So on March 7th, on what will be our normal Wednesday night live show like we're doing now, it will be the live Q&A with Jim and myself. So if you have questions for us, please join us for that show, listen in, or you can email them if it's something you can't join us live. If you email me in questions at therpgacademy@gmail.com and just label the questions in something GM Masterclass, so I'll be able to filter them properly. We will do our best to approach all the questions that we can get answered in probably 1 to 2 hours.
Oh, and I have questions, Michael.
Yes.
I have so many beefs. No, I mean, I feel bad that Twitter has a great way of starting a conversation between 2 or 3 people that drags in 16 other people.
Yes.
Yeah, and not that I don't love reading everybody's lovely opinions, but I should have maybe picked a better platform for that for that feedback next time.
Yeah, well, but I think that's fair. And again, we're not going to rehash all of that here because I'm sure we'll talk on it when we get to the Q&A. I'm sure that'll be a section. Mm-hmm. But the thing that you're talking about, we knew would be controversial. Like we knew when we recorded it, we looked at each other and said, this episode is going to cause some heat. All you got to do is spend 5 minutes on Reddit or Facebook D&D forum, and you're going to have the conversation is, does fudging dice as a GM make you a cheater? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? It's like politics and religion. There's people on both sides, and they don't like each other, and that's just the way it's going to be. Mm-hmm. But to Jim's credit, he knew that was going to be something that might cause people to reevaluate that whole series, which is frankly a beloved series by a lot of people. And now to have some of the smoke and mirrors explained, it might cause some reevaluation. So we knew that, but we both think it's valuable information. So I don't disagree with you, but I still hold that the advice we give is important advice that should be given. Whether it should be received or not is up to the individual listener.
Absolutely. And like I said before, obviously you guys did your L5R story one way, we did ours the other way. We're both herding goats on the same side of the hill here. There's no reason for us to beef anymore. But I mean, obviously, like what you demonstrate is that you can have radically different approaches to things and still make an awesome end product.
Yep, absolutely. And we do want to continue the GM Masterclass. It's something that I've wanted. It was actually, I mentioned I'm going back and re-listening to some of the old episodes. It was literally 4 years ago was the first time I said, I'd really like to do a director's commentary AP track. I think that would be a cool, fun thing to do. 4 years later, we're getting around to it. So, the original plan was to do the first L5R series and then do the second one. I'm starting to think I might want to bring in a different perspective before that.
A different L5R series that you can,
but maybe a different perspective. I mean, not just that particular thing, but a different type of game, a different system, just different personalities and experiences. I think that might be valuable. So we've been lucky enough. We had several other APs already express interest. It might just be like in passing on Twitter, but there seems like there's other APs that are interested, and certainly there are people in our network that I would love to have on as well. We are open to doing that, but I've got to put together a list. There's going to be some requirements. There has to be something that we're going to talk about. It can't just be, hey, I want to do it. Which episode? Why that episode? There's going to be some conversation, that kind of thing. But that is something we're looking at doing. I'm probably, when I have time, going to type up almost not an application, but like a list of bullet point facts and post that on the website. So if people are interested, they have the information to make an informed decision.
Yeah, I mean, I like a lot of people have been saying, I think it's a awesome idea that I haven't seen a lot of people play with, and I think it's the more different perspectives that you can get in on those types of things, and the more different ways that you can see people do their thing is always going to be better for the audience.
And there's a part of me, and we've said this, and it was kind of Michael's personal philosophy, but also on the podcast, that I think there's a lot of value in seeing failure. Mm-hmm. I would like for someone to step forward and say, hey, I did a terrible job in this particular episode or this particular moment. And maybe that's what we focus on that episode, is what I did wrong. And I probably can find some examples in our own AP. I kind of felt like I shouldn't do our own, at least not this early. But I do think that would be something very valuable, is when I screwed up, what happened? How did we fix it? What happened next? How did I recover? So on and so forth. But I think that would be valuable lessons.
I've actually done something similar. I'm going to plug a podcast that isn't part of our network, so no affiliation here. But there is a podcast that I listen to, I'm a big fan of, called RPG Lessons Learned, and they were kind enough to have me on a couple months ago. And their whole sort of spiel is similarly talking about, hey, this is our session and we're going to honestly critique ourselves about it. And I went on and I talked about the most disastrous recording session of Shadow of the Cabal I ever had, and digging into all the different things I did wrong and the in-game and out-of-game drama that sort of stemmed from that. So if you want to hear that from my point of view, it is out there. Go listen to RPG Lessons Learned. It's in their feed probably around halfway through.
All right. Very, very cool. So with all of that out of the way, let's get to the Catacon announcements. I know there's at least a couple people who are truly interested. And again, I will get this written up. It'll get posted pretty quickly. Hello, Key Cat.
Podcat. Oh, she doesn't like it.
So we were finally able to finalize the negotiations with the DCC. Neither one of us is very happy, so I think that means it was probably pretty successful negotiations. But we are going to go back to the DCC. It will be the same weekend again, so Veterans Day weekend for this year, which means the November 9th, 10th, and 11th, with the VIP event also happening on the 8th again, the Thursday night before. We are going to partner with the Crown Plaza once again, so once... Oh, sorry. Somebody popped up a chat, and I got distracted because I have ADD. So we're going to partner with the Crown Plaza again. So there will be an Catacon block. That's one thing that hasn't, like, I was waiting until I got back from the DCC, so I haven't had a chance to actually email them and say go. So the block isn't set up yet. So if anyone's really excited, wants to go reserve a room tonight, don't. Give me at least a few hours tomorrow morning to get that set up. I'm going to try to get a Catacon code that you can put in if you do it online. Last year, mostly had to call. But it should be basically, all of that should pretty much be the same. This year, though, Veterans Day actually falls on a Monday, which means I'll have the Monday after off, which will be nice because that's the first time ever I haven't had to immediately go back to work.
I think every attendee is going to be happy about that.
Mostly, I would say as well. But there are going to be a few changes. So on Friday, we're going to try to get started as early as 7 a.m., like just getting there and starting to set up. So we'll start registering people as soon as we're physically able to. So it might be like 7:15, 7:30, but we're going to start registering as soon as we can because the goal is to start games at 10 a.m. this year rather than noon because we have to be out earlier. We will no longer be doing the 24-hour event hall, at least not unless we just get ridiculous support money-wise, because it's very, very expensive. It's several $1,000s to keep it open 24 hours Friday through Sunday. So the thing is, we're going to close at 11. Everyone actually has to be out of the building by 11:30 or I start getting charged by the minute. So bad. So 11:30, everyone has to go. We'll reopen at 7 o'clock the next morning. Though, again, we probably won't have any games that officially start till 9, but if you want to come in and start hanging out, you can do that as 7. So we are going to do a Kickstarter again, sort of a hybrid thing because we need money for the deposits. That's always been the big speed bump for us, is that we have to put several $1,000s down early in the year to actually reserve that room. So we are going to launch a Kickstarter on March 14th at 9:15, which will be during a live one of these shows. So basically right now in that show, we're going to hit the big green button on the Kickstarter and talk about it while it goes hopefully crazy. But the Kickstarter is going to be very limited. The only badges that we're selling to the Kickstarter are VIP. That's it. The GM badges, the player badges, all that's going to happen later through Eventbrite. Only VIP badges will be going through the Kickstarter. There's going to be more of them available this year. We're going to do 25, and the price is going to be a little bit higher. But I'm working on getting some cool stuff to give the VIP, so hopefully no one will complain. I don't think so. They sold out last year in a nanosecond. I think we'll be okay this year, selling out the 25. And then we're going to do the special T-shirt again. So I'm wearing, an honor, I have last year's Kickstarter exclusive T-shirt. We're going to have a new Kickstarter exclusive T-shirt you can only get if you pledge to the Kickstarter. It's going to have a new logo, which I've already seen the pencil drawing. It's awesome.
Okay, there's been some debate amongst the Shadow of the Cabal people.
Okay,
what is the symbology? Why on the one that you're wearing? Why is it fighting a bird? I don't understand this.
Okay, so I don't know if I can try and get this on camera. So the joke was the first year we did this officially, we made a real big thing. We went to the lodge out in Houston Woods in Oxford, which was the first place that we did this event. And there were bleeping vultures everywhere. And I'm not kidding. Everywhere. Hundreds of them. They were just all over this creepy lodge in the middle of this national forest park. And it was just this big thing. And we would ask people about the vultures and they're like, oh no, they're well fed. And then we're like, wait, what does that mean?
Okay.
Exactly. So it kind of became the joke that the vultures were going to carry people away. So when we left the lodge, the joke kind of became we were leaving the vultures behind.
Gotcha.
So this symbolizes the fact that we were able to successfully raise enough money and have a successful event that we didn't have to go back to the lodge. The vulture represents a smaller Acadicon.
This is some deep RPG Academy lore we're getting right now.
You have to be there for the whole thing. Like this is an inside joke that's inside an inside joke.
Yeah, we got to open up the grimoire, record that one.
So we got a new t-shirt that'll go through there, but the majority of what we're going to look for are sponsorships. So again, we'll have the table toppers, which we've done every year, $25 if you have a podcast or game store, or just, I've had people YouTube channels. Some people just bought it for a friend and let them put their stuff on there. But basically it's $25 and we have like 100 tables this year. We've sold out of those every year. So I think we'll sell out of those again. We're gonna have corporate sponsorships again. So for like $150, you get table toppers on the registration. You get 2 badges, which is, basically almost like $100 value. So hopefully we will do the same, like our budget's based on duplicating what we've done in the past. So I would assume those will go fairly quickly. And then we're going to have a couple donation levels. There's obviously just because someone wants to give you $1 donation level. Then we're going to have the game library donation. So I'm going to post a list of all the games that we have, which is currently hidden behind my big tapestry here. All the games that I've bought. God, I'm from Kentucky. I've purchased. I'm gonna make a list of everything that we have, and then if there's a game that we don't have that you think we should, you think is like just a something that has to be part of a game library, you can donate enough money for us to buy it, and then we'll put a little like title card inside the lid that says this game was purchased by so and so, so that it's like buying a brick for a church or a pew or something like that. And then lastly, we have a donation level for individual rooms. Every time we get a side room for like our panels and stuff, that's $200 per day per room. So if someone wants to throw us $200, we'll name a room after you. This will be the Tanner Clausen room. Finally. And if you donate $400 or more, so you actually cover the same room more than once, we're going to make a banner that says the Tanner Clausen room. Everyone who plays in there will sign it, and I'll actually mail that banner back to you as a keepsake once everything's said and done.
This is an excellent idea.
That's the plan. So our goal for that is $6,000, which the VIP badges is $2,500 of that, which again, I know will go. And based on our last year's numbers, I can't see that would be a problem. If we get enough beyond that, we do have a couple other things that we're looking at doing. We have a web designer who's looking at redesigning our website for us, basically really cheap because they're a friend of the show, but not free. So we would like to raise enough money to maybe pay for that. But mostly the money will be going to put our deposits down. And then in August, we will launch the Eventbrite store for everything else. So GM badges, player badges, vendor spots, demo games, all that kind of stuff will all be August 1st on Eventbrite. And based on the numbers from last year, that should give us everything that we need. Goal this year, 700 people. We got a little over 500 last year. I think that's doable. I think that's it. There's quite a few people in chat, so I'll pause for a second. Does anyone have any questions that I might answer while we're waiting?
I can see Amelia in there asking if she can name a vulture after myself. I suggest that you become a wealthy millionaire and donate to a zoo. That'll be a better way to do that. Yeah, so just to summarize for everybody, Kickstarter in March to get VIP badges and pay for the deposit. And then Eventbrite will go live in August where you can buy your regular bona fide GM or player badges and sign up for the con.
Correct.
Excellent.
And Road is once again working on our scheduler. We had a prototype last year that just wasn't quite ready, so we had to go back to the one we'd used the one year before. This year, fingers crossed, the new one will be ready. It's got a lot more robust features. Should make scheduling games from the GM standpoint a little easier, signing tables, which will take a lot of the workload off of me. So Targris did ask about the VIPs and the partners. That is something that we have struggled with because the way Kickstarter works, we have a limited number. We can't have like 1,000 VIP badges. I wish we could, because if people bought them, that'd be great. So if you go in and you buy one, it immediately goes away. But if you wanted to get two, like for you and a partner of some sort, you kind of have to have two accounts. That's kind of the way that has to work. Unfortunately, that's the only way to make it fair. Though I have, again, especially for like the VIP event, if you get a VIP badge and your partner doesn't, you can bring your partner a VIP badge. No one's going to care about that. But as far as the other perks, that will be an issue. Again, it's not a perfect solution. I wish it was. That's
just a Kickstarter issue more than a us issue. Honestly, a Kickstarter doesn't have a really super great format of being able to select multiple rewards at once by default. That's sort of something that the creators they push onto the creators as a workload, from what I understand.
And we've tried to do that in the past, with like someone wanted to over pledge. They wanted to get 2 GM badges and a VIP badge and a tabletopper. I'm from retail. If you want to give me money, I will find a way to take it. But that requires a lot of work on our end because we have to go in and like change, like, okay, now there's only 24 badges available. What happens if we don't do that fast enough and then we've actually sold 26? Which 26 isn't a big deal, but why not 27? Like if we messed up and gave one extra person, why can't I also get an extra one? You get into some weird things there. So unless something changes, the current plan is you will have to have 2 accounts, both people, everyone in your friend circle, party, whatever. Everyone will have to jump on at once. We had 15 last year. They sold out very quickly. We're adding 10. There'll be 25 of them available this year. I don't know that those will go instantly. Maybe we'll have a little bit of time. Maybe.
Hopefully. I mean, you're more than doubling the amount of spots, so I think your chances are way better this year. They did go pretty quick in 2017.
Really quickly. And it's something we can commit to, that if our funding level does go really high, maybe we can add more. Like if we, make it as a stretch goal, because part of the benefit of being a VIP is that if everyone's a VIP, then no one's a VIP. I don't want too many people to be a VIP because then it loses the uniqueness. But if we're going to get to 800 people, then maybe we can add 5 more. If we get to 900 people, maybe we add 5 more, that kind of thing. So,
yep, we'll figure it out.
So New York Tater asked about adding a package that is for a pair of passes. Again, unfortunately, that doesn't work for Kickstarter, because if there's 25 VIP and there's 5 double passes, the Kickstarter will let me sell all of those. And then I will have sold 25 VIP and 10 more VIP. They don't cross out.
Provide a way to do math on the back end to make sure that only 25 are claimed total.
Correct. I would have to go in and manually change the number available each time someone does that. And again, if you're not quick enough on the draw, then it oversells, which I know that sounds like a dumb thing. Too many people want to give me money.
Right.
But I just don't want to I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. That's what this is all about. I don't want to say to one person, you don't get to be a VIP, but they do, even though they didn't follow the rules because they bought 3 passes at one time. Sorry, you're out. That's just, I don't like that.
Nathan's asking, what are the benefits of having the VIP badge? So I know off the top of my head, I didn't study for this question. you get invited to the mixer, which is on Thursday night, I believe. Yep, and you're going to see all the RPG Academy folks there and all the other people who have bought VIP badges. I think in 2017 it was in the hotel bar. Was that correct?
Yep.
And it was probably similar sort of plan for 2018.
Basically same thing. You just get to hang out, play some games, chat up, the faculty members, any of the other special guests, other VIPs, and local Dayton people who are like, who the blink are these people?
Yeah, we ran into a lot of those. And then you also get, I believe, are we going to do this again this year? First dibs on signing up for games for VIPs?
Yeah, we are looking at ways to make the overall process a little bit more equitable. But one of the benefits of being a VIP is you do get to go first. So 25 people will get about a week early start on registering for games. So if there's something you really want to get into, the best chance is to be a VIP, and then you're only competing with 24 other people rather than with 600 other people or whatever.
Yeah, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I know just from personal experience, my games that I was running, I ran 2 games for a total of 8 slots of people, and I believe they both filled up within 5 or 6 hours of it going open for the VIPs, and then I had to turn a lot of people away from the table, which sucked. So, A, I'm going to be running more games, and B, if you want to be a VIP and get in on those early, you will have the pick of the litter, so to speak, of what you want to play.
Yeah, so that's the thing. And we've also, the last 2 years, been able to give a set of metal dice from one of our sponsors. Easy Roller Dice has every year given us it's like a $45 value set of their metal dice. I have not confirmed with them yet because we've added 10 more VIPs. That's like $500 more we would be asking. So I'm not going to assume that they're going to say yes this year. So there's no promises that anyone will get any free swag, but that is something I'm looking at trying to do. If not them, I'm looking to get free swag for all the VIPs as well. But again, I'm not going to promise it. And then the last thing that you get as a VIP is we do a faculty retreat, which is for network members only. We go up to Michigan because one of our network affiliates works at that hotel and gets us a stupid good rate. And we have a 3-day gaming weekend. It's just us. It's just us hanging out in a room playing games. And if you're a VIP, you get invited to that. We don't pay for anything. You do get the stupid rate on the rooms because we all get that. But otherwise, it's an invite to something that's a private event. So there's like 12, 15 of us up there playing games basically for 72 straight hours. And you get to come hang out with us if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of good opportunities for VIP badge. Yeah, like I said, I'm fully recommend people hop on it early. The biggest thing for me is getting those first dibs on games is pretty huge, I think. And I'm excited that more people have a chance to do that this year.
And I think we're going to try as well to schedule some of the really choice games against each other. So you couldn't have a VIP that literally gets like every one of the choice games. Like they're still going to have to make choices between some things, so that it's not like after the VIPs there's nothing left, because we have a ton of games. They're all going to be great, but there are a few that are high profile. I know my Scooby-Doo Dread game it was sold out. It was a VIP only event. So I probably will run that again, maybe a couple times to try to give other people a choice. But again, we're getting way into the weeds now. No one other than the people who are asking questions right now cares about this.
Yeah, Amelia says that she's learning too much right now, so we better change subjects.
Okay. Excuse me. If there are any other questions, throw them in chat. I'll try to get to them. Again, we will be posting this on the website soon. We'll be putting it on the Facebook and on the Twitter and all that kind of good stuff. But the biggest thing is March 14th, 9:15 p.m. If you want a VIP badge, that's where you want to be and when you want to be there. So, and that's obviously Eastern time because that's where I live. Okay. So with all that, let's actually get into the topic here tonight. We're going to talk about video games and what we can learn from them and apply to our role-playing games. But before we do that, we always like to take a step back and talk about why we are here. So Tanner and I like to talk about role-playing games because we hope that through these conversations, there might be something that you can learn, as I have not done this in a while, that you can glean from our many years of playing tabletop role-playing games. But we understand that the opinions we share and the advice we give may not work at every table every time, but there is one piece of advice that we feel is pretty universal. And Tanner, what is that one piece of advice?
If you're having fun, you are doing it right.
That is correct. So no matter what game you're playing, which system or edition, what rules you use, don't use, misuse, fudge dice, as long as you're having fun at your table, you're doing it right.
I'm about to walk away from this conversation.
So quick, again, I hate to do a quick question about the GM badge. Yes, the GM badge, actually I meant to mention this, all the prices are going to go up a little bit. They're not, I don't think they're crazy amounts, but everything is going to go a little bit. So the GM badge is a little bit more than it was last year, but basically the same thing applies. It's a much cheaper badge, but you agree to run 2 things for us. And that's pretty much it. Because we're not going to start selling those till August, the turnaround time will be much quicker. Like as soon as you buy a GM badge, we're going to start registering your games. There's not going to be a buy badge and then wait 4 months and then start registering. As soon as you buy it, we're going to ask you what you want to run. We'll start plugging it in to the spreadsheet and all that kind of good stuff. So everything is going to be the same, just the timetables are going to be a little bit squished together. And apparently there's a squirrel behind me. I'm thinking they might think this is my dragon is a squirrel.
Oh, yeah. I got you on my nice new big monitor so I don't make that mistake.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. So what we wanted to talk about tonight, again, was taking lessons learned from video games and seeing how we can apply those into role-playing games. Now, where this came from is, as I was telling you before we started recording, I just rarely recently got into into video games again. I haven't really played them in several years since I had kids, and then the podcast has really become my hobby. So pretty much the last 6 years, if I'm not doing something else, I'm working on the podcast. So haven't been a lot of time for video games. So recently I decided to get back into them. I've started playing some of my old favorites, and it's caused me to kind of make some connections. Like that's an interesting choice, or that was an interesting thing. And I've started to try to apply them to role-playing games. Now, the first thing that I came up with, and I'm not saying this is at all a good idea, but it was a thought that I had, is when I play video games, I am absolutely a min-maxer. I try to maximize whatever it is about my character that I want to do. Usually it's like charisma, persuasion. If you're playing a game like Mass Effect or Knights of the Old Republic, I want to get all the cool features. I want to be able to, persuade people to do things, right? So I will do everything in my power to make that as high as possible, including using cheat codes if I have to. But when I play video games, I don't do that at all. When I play role-playing games, I don't do that at all. I don't care anything about that. The mechanics of the world mean very little to me. And I started wondering if that's because in a video game, I can kind of see where I'm going. So specifically, I was trying to level up a certain character in this game I'm playing. So I was grinding. It's Marvel's Ultimate Alliance. It's no secret what I'm playing. It's the game where you can do the training missions, like
it's such a good game.
the danger room stuff where you can just basically play. So I would just play the same ones over and over for like hours, just getting experience points and the gold that you can use to buy your better equipment, right? But the reason I did that is I could always see the end point. I could see, well, once I got, 40,000 credits, I could afford this thing. Or once I got to this many experience levels, I would be able to unlock this cool super power that I want to do. So I started thinking that if you were to remove the ability to plan your character's advancement, would that affect, again, not saying it's a good idea, would that affect people's perception of trying to grind levels in like a D&D game where it's like, okay, once I get to 8th level and I take this feat, then I get to do this super cool thing. If you're not thinking that, if you don't know that at 8th level it unlocks the thing. You don't know that at 8th level you get to do the super cool thing. You just know what your character can do now. Would that affect the way the game feels at the table?
Well, I think for the sort of default understanding of, the most popular role-playing games like D&D, where, progression is a core sort of carrot and stick of the game.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to get experience, you're trying to, whether that's killing monsters or getting treasure or completing quests or whatever, or doing milestone XP. I think you still need to have the promise of you'll get cool stuff later. Otherwise, you kind of run out of reason to be motivated, I think, maybe as a player or a player character. But like you said, like in an RPG, a video game RPG, you can say, oh, yeah, like I want to save up 40,000 XP so I can buy this ability or whatever. And if you kind of take that information away, it just kind of becomes a promise between the GM and the player, or the GM who presumably knows what's going on, and saying, oh, it'll be worth it. Don't worry, wink, wink. And it's an interesting thought, but I don't know if it would work at the table. It would require a very specific type of group, I think, to work.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, this is just a thought experiment. Like I don't really have any plans on doing it. I'm just sort of thinking through how would it make me feel. And anecdotally, I have some friends I've played games with over my career, over my life. And the ones that I know are the ones who would sit down and go, this is my character at every level. I've already planned which feats I'll take when, which magic items I want at this level, blah, blah, blah.
I've also played Pathfinder.
Okay. Well, those are the people who are usually, my experience, the ones that are very focused on leveling. They're more focused on the math of the game and grinding out experience points and trying to do everything they can to get the experience points, because they're playing for the future. That's their satisfaction is going to come unlocking that cool thing that they've been working toward for weeks, months, or years.
Right.
So I don't know that you could hide that particularly, because again, it would only work once, because once they've gone up a few levels, they would know, or they just go by the book even though they're not supposed to. But I think the way it would work, it would have to be a different type of game. I'm thinking more like a spy thriller. Like if you're James Bond and you start off as James Bond, you're already super cool. Then you're not worried about getting better super cool. You're just enjoying the experience of being super cool.
Yeah.
Would it work better if there's just wasn't such a thing? Like maybe you can still get new loot. You get the cool new car,
sure,
the pin that shoots darts out of it, but that's not something you earn. It's just something that comes with as the story develops.
Right. And like I think you're touching on something, which is that certain games are more predicated on progression as being the carrot and the stick, and some games really aren't. Like, obviously if you take it in the context of a one shot, if you're playing a one shot and everyone at the table knows it, you're not really worried about how much extra XP am I going to get, because you're going to be done with the session and the story at the end of it anyway. To kind of reframe that, oftentimes in D&D, your characters will get a tip on, oh, this location has a bunch of treasure in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your characters still want to go in and plunder that location, even if they don't know what the treasure is. And even if there's no solid rules for them of what they should spend the treasure on, And I think if you kind of look at XP the same way, maybe, as being, sometimes the carrot is all you need. You don't need the stick, so to speak. Like, I think it's an easier sell to say, oh, hey, go adventure and you'll get treasure and you can use that to spend on whatever you want and who knows what'll come from it, rather than here's some XP, you'll get some, who knows what'll come from it. I think it's a little bit easier sell if it's something in universe as opposed to an out of game concept like experience points.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this for probably a week now, just kind of going back and forth. And I think what I have ultimately come up to is, if you're the type of player like I am that doesn't care a lot about it. I still think it's fun to roll dice and get not high numbers and kill goblins. It's fun, but that's not what I play the game for. That I don't need to have this information hidden because I don't care already.
Right.
And if you're the type of player who does care, hiding it's not going to make the game better for you. You're just going to want to know things that are now hidden. So I don't think it would work, because who is it for? The people who it's for don't need it.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be interesting. I think the only people that it might be for would be if you're, say, playing with a group of 4 brand new players and you don't want them to get overwhelmed by the character options that you get later on or how to build a character. And you just tell them, you're level 1, this is what you got, here's the story, here's the adventure, run with it.
Right.
And then once you hit level 2, you say, okay, here are your options. And that's more of almost a tutorial rather than an intentional sort of, not trick, but an intentional gimmick that you're playing with.
Technique.
So, yeah, technique. That's probably more generous than I was being. But yeah, I think it would work for that type of context, but I'm not sure. Yeah, like you said, who's it for? Like you said, people like you and I probably play for the story, and there are people who, if they don't play the story, they're probably playing for the mechanics, and hiding from the mechanics from them isn't going to do them any favors.
Right,
so.
yeah. So again, I think it's fun as a thought experiment. If anyone out there, again, there's a couple people in chat talking a little bit about it as well, but if you have any thoughts or maybe experiences, I know, for example, Fate came to mind, because Fate has a very sort of flat advancement. You don't really get a lot better, you just get broader, different things that you can do. So it's kind of a game that does that in a way. There's not any real super benefit in like Fate Core to getting higher levels. You know, like you don't get the super cool thing. You already have the super cool thing. It's your stunt. You know, you already start with it, which again goes back to the sort of the James Bond example.
Yeah, L5R 4th edition, which is what we were playing, that's kind of similar, where in D&D, you know, if you want to think about the graph, you very much go from 0 to hero in D&D, from levels 1 through 20, for example. In L5R, you start out a little bit more competent, and the curve's a little bit flatter. Not to say that a rank 5 character isn't way stronger than a rank 1 character, but you're generally not superhuman by the end of it. So I think that sort of subtly, intentionally or not, focuses how you think about progression, I think. And it's less about like, oh, what cool new technique, and be like, oh, what skills should I pick up that makes sense for my character to spend my XP on? Just a different perspective on it.
All right. So again, so that was more of just theoretical. Here, there's a couple now I want to talk about that I think are actually applicable to the game. The first one that came to my mind is that video games, and again, I'm talking very generalities, I'm talking about the ones I've played, it encourages and rewards exploration.
Right. I was actually going to bring this up too.
Okay. I stole your thunder. and I don't necessarily just mean explore, like, again, like in a dungeon where you get every room, nook, and cranny, though that is accurate as well, but just exploring the world. Like if you talk to more people, you might find out new information or better information. You know, if you spend time interacting with all the NPCs and coming back to them when things change and having new conversations, you get a better sense of the world, and you get more of a story satisfaction. But you can also unlock gear. You know, the person you meet on the street the first time you give an alm to the beggar, you know, you come back to that same city 3 or 4 times later, turns out they're actually part of the Thieves Guild or whatever. Like they unlock a mission, and once you get to that mission, you get to go into this place in this temple, and you steal a thing, and now you get this +4 sword that you don't need, but it's cool to have, and you only get it because you continually interact with the world.
And exploration in that case is its own reward. And I think that's something that I think video games might do that slightly better than tabletop games, at least by default. At least for an average game, say that rewarding exploration is a little bit more valuable in video games. So most video games, like I'm playing like Monster Hunter right now, and there's enormous environments in there with all sorts of little nooks and crannies, and it's a game about exploration, right? That work was all done by a team of developers over several years to make it.
Yep.
And that's why it's rich and rewarding, and you can find something around every corner. It's a little bit unreasonable, I think, to ask a GM to prepare something like that much, of like literally here's a huge 1 square mile area, and every 3 yards there's a point of interest. Like I don't really think that's feasible. So
it's also scripted. Like, you know, like it only triggers when X happens. It's not like a role-playing game. It's once you've done A, B, and C, then this happens regardless of anything else that happens in the game.
Right. And I think that there are ways around it as a GM, say having a lot of random tables that you can roll on. So, hey, maybe when they go into this area, you improvise something. You roll a couple times on a table and you say, oh yeah, there's a guard tower that is inhabited by ghosts. Okay, cool. Now you have you just made up an adventure. But I have a question for you. Do you consider that exploration if the GM just had to make it up on the fly? Does that scratch the same itch as exploring a video game does, when you know that somebody put care into the thing you just discovered, as opposed to just making it up just now?
Well, I think, and this piggybacks on the discussion we're not going to have, is only if I know it. If the GM makes it seem like oh, you asked this person this question. Lucky you. And I have no idea that this was like just BS that was made up, but this is like the plan all along. Then yeah, great. But if it's clear that they're just sort of figuring it out, I think it would still be interesting because I got something for caring, and I think that's important. But I don't think it would be as fun as if I thought it was always there and I was smart for finding it.
I completely agree with you on this part when it comes to the idea of like discovering something that's improvised versus discovering something that's prepared. Obviously, in most video games, unless there's someone's doing some really crazy stuff, you're not going to discover something improvised. Or I mean, there's games that you might find procedurally generated things, or like, oh, you just happen to have been here when these two monsters are fighting each other. That's the story now, you know. But for the most part, tabletop games are less equipped to make that type of exploration happen.
So here's my question. How can we adapt this? How can we try to implement it in some way into a RPG so that it does feel rewarding and it is something that we can do without requiring a team of writers and spending 6 years developing it? Is it possible, and if so, how?
I think so. I think you kind of have to find a middle ground of what we were talking about of I've prepared this adventure versus I'm making this up on the fly. So a lot of like hex crawl type games or systems like old D&D or a lot of OSR games will have they'll have a whole map and they'll show you in this hex, and there'll be a little paragraph that's in this hex of like the bugbears of the Black Stick tribe are at war with the orcs here. They have a network of tunnels and the Ant Queen is invading. That's enough that's more interesting than most people could probably have improvised right on the spot. It's not a whole adventure. It's not a whole even dungeon map for you, but it's something to get you going that was thoughtful, at least. Like it was placed there thoughtfully, and then it's up to you as the GM to make that work and make that interesting for your game and your context. So I think, in my opinion, the closest you can get to something like true exploration without, making the GM into a full-time writer is stuff like that. Little blurbs that are evocative that you can develop at the time and are interesting, but aren't overly long or overkill.
So I'm a self-described improv-heavy GM. So I think what I would do, and what I have done in some cases, is I reward it when it happens. I don't plan for it, which I think you're talking about more about trying to give yourself seeds that you can, sprout into something if they're watered through exploration. But if I throw out a random NPC, and I mentioned this on Twitter the other day, I always like to throw out random details that I have no idea what they mean, but I'll just include, an interesting scar with, a three-headed snake on someone tattoo on the back of their hand. There is no story about the three-headed snake right now, but it's just a detail. An NPC might have really vibrant green eyes, or a guard might be wearing an ancestral belt that marks them as noble. Like, why is there a noble in the guard, right? And if the PCs kind of latch onto that and they think that's interesting, so they keep themselves coming back to it, then it does become important. I will make something up, and maybe I can't make it up on the fly, but if I see that they're interested. Okay, they seem really interested in that guard. Who is that guard? Okay, so maybe the next time they go back to them and someone says, hey, I noticed your belt, let me tell you the story of my family, because I've kind of prepared a little bit for it. And maybe they come back around. Now, hey, I'd love it if you could help me reclaim my title because it was stolen by this other person.
Yeah.
And now we've got maybe there was a dungeon that was supposed to be clearing out were-rats. Guess what? Now it's an evil noble. Same dungeon, same encounters, they're just not were-rats anymore. Or maybe they're were-rat nobles. Who knows?
I've done that in my campaign. I've done that in Shadow of the Cabal. There was an NPC I introduced pretty early on that I just needed an NPC in a second, and I gave him a terrible samurai Brooklyn accent, and my players latched onto him, and they tried to, that's the classic story of like, you make up an NPC on the fly and the players get super attached to them and they want to try to bring him in and everything. And so I said, oh, of course, when they come back to the city, he's actually this guy, and they just encountered him early on. I mean, it was just some Joe Schmo number 95 in my original notes, but now, of course, it's him, and they got to build a relationship with him, which is cool, which video games can't really do that,
Yeah, again, if they're not important when they're written, they don't become important later. That can't happen in a video game, but I think a role-playing game. So I think a good balance between the two is when you're writing your notes or you're thinking about your world, sprinkle in things that aren't directly related to the plot, but sound interesting. You know, there's two nations over here that are close to war. There's rumors of a dragon, even though one hasn't been seen in 1,000 years. It's just a rumor, so maybe it's not a dragon. That has nothing to do with your story, but if they latch onto it, you can just kind of keep bringing it around and seeing where it goes, and be comfortable and willing to deviate from what you thought was going to happen. I really thought my players were going to follow this story, and they were going to find the priest who is, you know, actually a demon in disguise. Turns out they're a lot more interested in that dragon. Right. All right, well, now we're going to go dragon hunting. So that's what's going to happen. I
like the words that you used. You have to have a certain level of confidence as a GM to leave hanging threads, and threads that you don't know where they're going to go. But just like you said, you know, just like, oh, this guy has a snake tattoo on the back of his hand. That's an interesting detail on its own. And then maybe, hey, someday if you need a criminal cult that worships the snake goddess, hey, you've laid the seeds for that. And being able to throw something out there and not know where it's going is a secret GM skill that it's hard to teach, I think.
Yeah, I do think random details would be something. You have to be ready to make them mean something later, but I love just throwing out details as if they're important and just see what they latch on to. Mm-hmm. So Game Master's Vault had asked a question earlier about our first topic, you know, like their disabled device going up only because their character had been using that skill. There was a game I played one time back in college, and I want to say it was called Rollmaster.
Yeah, I was going to say like Mithras, Rollmaster, those BRP games, the D100 system, right?
Again, it's been like 20 years. I don't remember, but I do remember there were no classes, and whatever you did that night, you then rolled a die, and there's a chance it would improve. So if you cast a spell, swung your sword, and picked a lock, each one of those things has the potential to get better based off of how many times you used it and then your dice rolling. So over time, you would just get better at what you were doing, which is kind of what that sounds like.
There's a more modern system, the Burning Wheel, which is used for games like Mouse Guard or Torchbearer, and they have a similar thing. I feel like it's a little bit more interesting and more elegant in that to level up a skill, you have to fail it a certain number of times and succeed at it a couple number of times. Okay. So you can't just go for easy things. You're never going to improve. You'll get your successes quick, but you need failures. So you need to be pushing yourself to maybe even bite off things that you know you're going to fail at, but hey, at least I can mark a failure and I can level this up. So that kind of stuff I think is a little bit more interesting, because in Rollmaster or something like that, I mean, obviously we're both kind of fuzzy on the mechanics, but from our understanding, I mean, if you want to level up swordsmanship, you better be going into a sword fight every time with your sword out. But in something like Torchbearer, you know, there's a mechanical incentive to kind of bone yourself over once in a while, which makes the story more fun, I think.
Right, cool. Yeah. So Game Master Vault had also asked a question to you about 4 minutes ago or so, and I don't know now what it was connected to because I know there's a delay. She asked, in the moment and not as part of leveling up.
Right. I think that's what we were talking about with Rollmaster, where at Rollmaster, from what we understand, I like that we're both just saying what we think Rollmaster is at this point. I find myself doing that so much with things. But like you said, from what you described, you do it at the end of the session as a part of level up or getting XP, as opposed to Burning Wheel, the example that I was giving, where you mark it immediately. And if that is your third failure or your third success or whatever you needed, boom, your skill goes up by 1 and you erase your failures and successes and you start again.
Okay.
So Burning Wheel, to answer your question, Game Master's Vault, it does do that in the moment.
Okay. So my next sort of concept coming from playing video games recently, which ties in very closely to this one, is the more difficult stuff is usually optional. You know, again, I don't need that +5 sword, but it would be really cool to have. But if I want the +5 sword, I got to keep searching that dungeon until I find that secret door.
Yeah, a lot of Japanese RPGs, I'm a really big fan of the Tales of series, and a lot of them, it's sort of a theme in every entry in the game. They're kind of like Final Fantasy games in that they're all similar, but not really the same story. They're not sequels really to one another, but they have sort of common mechanics, and one of them is there's always an optional super hard-ass dungeon that the rewards aren't even worth it. It's just to say that you could do it, right. You know? And I definitely have done stuff like that in D&D, like when I ran my 5th edition campaign, you know, I gave them the option of like, okay, you guys are broke, you need to fund your pirate ship, your ship costs money, here's some leads. Here's a easy treasure trove. Here's one that might have a lot of treasure, but it's literally guarded by a goddamn dragon. So, it's fun to make them play with that risk reward. I think you have to be more cognizant of RPGs where there is no save and reload.
Yes.
As opposed to a video game where if you get halfway through and you're like, oh, this sucks, you can revert to an easier save or use an escape rope to get out of the dungeon, where in RPGs, it's kind of what happens.
Yeah, so that's my challenge now, again, just as a thought experiment. How do you implement that in a game where, assuming you don't play a game that has a high magic and, resurrections are a dime a dozen, and if your character dies, you're dead, how do you reward that extra effort when the price is so high for failure?
I think it just comes down to you have to signpost what the danger is. I think everybody who's played RPGs for a certain amount of time has a horror story of, oh, the GM expected this to be a really hard encounter and we bumbled into it and we didn't know it was supposed to be the final boss, or, it was way harder than we were anticipating. And I think just saying, in game of like, oh, you see the charred remains of adventurers outside the entrance to this cave. That's one way to do it. But I think it's also valuable to just say out of character, hey, players, this is going to be a really hard fight. It's optional. It's optional. Don't feel like I'm forcing. I do that kind of stuff all the time. And I try to signpost what is difficult and what isn't, just like an example, some games have that baked in with like mook rules. If you're playing Star Wars and you see one Imperial officer and 5 stormtroopers, well, those stormtroopers are all going to be a gang of minions that you can probably just take out the whole gang of them in 2 or 3 turns. But the fact, I don't know, there's ways to suggest what's difficult and what's not, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I also think the difficulty doesn't necessarily have to be measured in character death. But it depends on the game you're playing and the type of story. What else could it be? So, maybe you have to put something on the line. Again, I literally have not thought of this ahead of time. I'm trying to make something up right now. But maybe before you can do this thing, you have to pay a bounty, or you have to, here's the deed to my land as collateral. I'm going to go, and if I can bring out the chalice of whatever, then X happens. If not, I now no longer have my land, or whatever the thing is, whatever the value is in your game, your story.
Another idea is maybe putting a sort of time limit on it where you can say, hey, Zathrax the Beholder is about to take all of his treasure and through the portal into the Nether Realm, and you have 1 week to get there and stop him. So if you fail and you mess up, well, he gets away with his treasure, but you're not dead.
Right.
So
I think that's a really good example, is to put a time limit where failure is wasted effort. But it's not character death. I mean, it still can be. You go into a dungeon with a beholder, you might die, but it's not like it's A or B. You either kill the beholder or you die. It's maybe you don't get the treasure, but you wasted a week in game. Turns out the week you were gone, this other thing happened that you really aren't happy about.
Right. Or even setting that up ahead of time of being like, hey, there's a crisis here and there's a dungeon full of gold on the way. But man, if you mess up and you take a long time in that dungeon, guess what? You're not going to make it to event X in time. So
for some reason, the thing that just popped in my head was that the Brady Bunch movie where they needed $10,000 and there just happened to be a battle of the bands that paid out $10,000. So they didn't have to do the battle of the bands. They could have possibly got $10,000 another way. I think robbing a bank was on the table at one time. But there's that carrot stick. It's like, okay, you need X. There just happens to be X over here. But if you fail, then you just don't get X, and now you don't have it. So it's like, do you take the more secure, guaranteed route, or do you go for the gusto and you try to win it early or easy or something like that? That could be a fun example, I think.
I'm sure you made a really good point just there, but I just started thinking about the Brady Bunch heist game that I have to play now. I think I have to run that, right? Get it in like Wushu or like Fiasco, and the Brady Bunch has to. You have character sheets for every single. Oh man,
that might also be a Dread game. It could go hand in hand with Scooby Doo Dread. It could be Brady Bunch Dread.
Yeah,
awesome. All right, so one of my other topics here. If you miss something, it can usually be found somewhere else. If it's crucial to the story, like if you have to find X and it's in a dungeon and you don't go to that room, the game will usually move it somewhere else, and you'll find it in a different room or a different dungeon, or it's for sale. I know I was been playing X-Men Legends, which is like the precursor to Marvel Ultimate Alliance, and you find the training discs that let you do the danger room. If you miss one, there's a guy later who will sell it to you.
Right. So video games really quantum ogre you all the time, don't they?
Yes, they do. But is that a bad thing? I mean, I don't want to know that that's what happened. Like, if we go into the dungeon because we need the sword of, Bazar, and we don't find it, I don't expect the next trader who comes to the town happens to have it. But if it's like a thing that I really need them to find this note because the note is what lets them know that the priest and the noble are working together, and they don't go where the note is, maybe 2 weeks later, there's a rumor that pops up that it's not definitive, but it lays the groundwork that maybe there's something going on.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that in an RPG, or a tabletop RPG, I should say, we got to start denoting what we're talking about now.
Correct.
In a tabletop game, I think that I am more of a fan of, okay, I really want the party to get their hands on the Sword of Bazar. They missed it in the dungeon. I'm not just going to say, oh, it was in the merchant's stronghold the whole time and he's about to sell it to you. I'm going to try to think of a story of how it got there. Maybe right after you came in and cleared out all the monsters, bandits came in and they took it and plundered it and they fenced it. So stuff like that, just making it seem plausible as to why you're quantum ogring them. Yeah. I'm just harping on that now, but making it plausible as to why you're throwing it in their face again, so to speak.
Yeah, that actually could be kind of a funny scene, like where you meet up with the people who got it. You're like, hey, did you guys remember seeing the red rock? Yeah, total secret passage behind there. Sword was just there. You just missed it.
Right. Yeah, I think as long as you can plausibly explain it in a format that doesn't make your party laugh at the table, you did it okay.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Yeah, you always got to go for the laugh test, I think.
And even if you go into laugh test, again, I feel like if you're making me laugh, that's a win. Even if I'm trying to play a super serious game, I like to laugh. So if you can make me laugh, that's still okay. Mm-hmm. So the last one that I have, just again, I'm sure there's a billion more if I keep playing video games. But in particular with Marvel Ultimate Alliance, if there's a particular puzzle that you need to solve, the game won't let you leave that room until you solve it. So you'll go into a room, force field appears behind you, and until you move the thing where the thing has to move, because that unlocks a door later in the dungeon, you can't leave that room. I kind of feel like I could see that going both ways in some respects, but I do like the fact that I'm not going to go into a room, not realize that it's a puzzle, go, deeper and deeper into the dungeon. Now I can't get through because I don't have the red key, and I have no idea what room the red key was supposed to be in. If there's a way to say, there's a puzzle here, you need to solve it, or you won't have the red key.
Right. Most video games don't let you strand yourself somewhere, which is very wise. When it comes to me, I mean, I'm sure that, again, this is probably a story that everybody has of the GM threw a puzzle at our session or at our party, and man, he thought it was really obvious, but God, did we just spend 2 hours trying to figure out the GM's stupid crossword puzzle that he says, you idiots, you should have figured this out.
Yep.
So I think a way to modify that is that whenever I've run into that, I've been that GM, and the way that I like to solve it is whenever I set up a puzzle, I set up, this is the puzzle, and if you're clever, you can get it this way. Here's a very clear other option that is the brute force. It will cost you a lot, but you will get through it. Yeah. So something like, oh, there's going to be a flame trap on this doorway that you can see. You can try to do the puzzle to disarm it with a combination lock, or you can just run through it. You lose some HP. You might have to spend some healing potions, but you'll be through it. So I think what you're saying is that like a video game is more than happy to just tell you to sit down and shut up and stall out your progress and say, figure it out, where I think a good GM would avoid that.
I think so too. I think this comes down to another tip we've talked about before, is you don't want to bottleneck your dungeon where if you don't have the red key, you can't go any further. So it's not, there shouldn't really be a situation where you have to figure out the puzzle here. I like what you said. There's multiple options. Maybe if you figure out the puzzle, it's better, it's easier, it's faster. There's more loot on the other side of that door than the other door, but they both will go eventually to the same place. So I think that's an option. The other thing I thought about with puzzles is giving a sense of being correct. For example, you got the 3 levers, and each lever has 3 positions, and you got to get each level into the right one. There should be like a click.
Or a chime.
Or a chime. Yeah. When you get it right, if you get it wrong, maybe it shocks you. So you're like, okay, no shock, no shock. Ow, these 2 are right. It's like the game of Price is Right, where 3 out of 4 are right. You got to figure out which one's not right and move it. So I think that's another way that you can help figure out the puzzle. You're not locking them into the room, but you're giving them enough information. They're not just going to say, we moved it in every direction. Nothing ever happened. We have no idea what's going on. Give them some feedback to like, okay, you're making progress along the way to success.
Yeah. And I think there's more sort of organic ways to do that too. Maybe your puzzle is you have a animated statue who's asking the players a riddle to get by. And maybe you as the GM are role playing. And when they're getting hot, you give a little smile and you can say, yeah, you see the statue is, like even subtle things of like playing hot and cold, even with if it drags down too much is a strategy too.
Yeah. Well, 2 things I thought of there is, one, we played Hanabi last night on YouTube. We weren't supposed to, we did it. If you've never, like, because we did that exact thing where like one of us is going through the logic, like, well, you told me this was a 4. So does that mean I can't play this 4, or does that mean this is the 4 that I'm supposed to play now? And we're like, that is a line of logic that think that could be it. So we're giving like these context clues without trying to actually say, yes, you moron, it's the 4 you need to play. But the other thing I thought of would be, I just had this image of like a statue that as you're getting things right, it's getting closer, or maybe if you're getting things wrong, it's getting closer because the statue's going to come to life. So you physically see it getting closer. Or when you get it right, it starts to back away.
Yeah.
And then you have the one player who starts doing this to make it dance, just because, there's always that one player that does that.
And there are some puzzles that might provide instant feedback. I saw a list online. It was like 100 dungeon room ideas or something. And one of them was, okay, you're in this dungeon and you have to get to the other side of it. But each turn you slow down and you can only move half as the speed that you did last turn.
Oh.
So if you move 30 feet in one turn, you suddenly find yourself with 15 feet of movement this turn. And so that type of thing is a very clear signal of, whoa, something's up.
Yeah.
We have to stop and think about this and figure out how to get through that adventure. Sorry, I ignored Nathan's question. Nathan said, it's not really a question, but he commented, now everyone can look up the answers for video games online in about a minute.
Yeah, gamesfact.com is on my browser windows.
Yep, there is no game facts for my D&D or RPG games, I'm sorry to say, but...
Well, but then Game Master's Vault mentioned if you're playing a module, someone else may have read the module and already know the answer. And like most riddles are recycled, and it might be the riddle in this module, but it's also a riddle that you've heard 1,000 other times in other contexts.
Right. Yeah. And I think that just sort of comes down to when you sit down at a table, there's a spoken or unspoken social contract between you and your copy of X-Men Marvel Ultimate Alliance. There's no social contract.
Nope.
You are my toy to play with until I have fun. And that is not always what players or your GM should be.
Absolutely. So those are the points that I had pulled out. Is there anything that you would want to again, I know you hadn't prepared for this topic, but do you have any other examples of things that you've got from a video game that you think is an interesting thing to try to include or just worthy of note?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can always mine video game stories for ideas, just like you can mine any story for an idea. But I think that, you can watch a TV show, an episode of Lost or something and say, wow, that'd be a great idea for a session. But video games allow you to, at least modern ones, allow you to have a real sense of choice as to what happens. In a game, like you said, Mass Effect or Dragon Age or The Witcher or something, it will present you with a quest with multiple endings to it. And if you're a GM, you're like, wow, this is a really good premise. You can play out all 3 or 4 or 2 of those endings and see how they shake out. And you can say, oh, wow, you know what? I'm going to steal endings A, B, and C for this quest for my game, but D and E don't really make sense, so I'm going to leave those out. So being able to explore different avenues like that are pretty interesting. Nathan also just asked, I missed Larry Talk. Have either of you played Shadow of War, and have you thought about the nemesis idea for the foes that the PCs don't kill? Yes, Nathan. I actually just probably got done with about 30 hours of Shadow of War. That game gives me so many ideas for running an RPG. I think that's one of the few that really can. So are you familiar at all, Michael? With
No, I have not. Nope, no
Okay.
idea.
So it's a Lord of the Rings game, right? The basic premise is that you're in Mordor, you're a ghost human that you can come back multiple times, and there is a network of orcs, and they are in a hierarchy, and you can play them against each other. And these are all randomly generated characters too. These aren't pre-programmed characters with voices or whatever. So you might get in a fight with one and cut off his arm, but he'll come back and now he has a claw in his hand and he wants revenge for you. And like that type of stuff is the closest that I've ever seen a video game come to what a good role-playing game, tabletop role-playing game would be like. And I think that, yes, steal everything that you can from this game. That gave me an idea of an awesome D&D like sandbox game saying, all right, the kingdom of the elves has finally fallen, the tyrants are done, and all these noble houses are squabbling against each other. Your job is to just go F stuff up, make their lives as miserable as possible, play them against one another, betray them, ally, and being able to play in that type of sandbox and pit those characters against each other. That's an awesome, that's a campaign seed right there, I think, for sure.
Very, very cool. So yeah, unfortunately I have not played that. It sounds like maybe I should.
Yeah.
All right. So anything else? We're getting close to we need to wrap up here, but if you have anything else, we'll try to address it.
Sure. I just want to say, fire in quick, that like we've addressed, there are things that video games do very well that tabletop games don't, and there are things that tabletop games do very well that video games don't. So I would say if you see a really cool idea in a video game, before implementing it in tabletop or trying to write a game about it even, or just have a session inspired by it, think about why it works and just try to work your way through of like, what would this be like at the table? For example, Dark Souls is a really popular game series, and people I think have been trying to crack the nut of how to turn that into a tabletop game. But fundamentally, what that game is about is reading enemy patterns and really precise stick movement and things that, while super fun to play on a home console, how do you translate that to a tabletop RPG?
Many people have tried and failed.
Yes, and you can see mountains of bones of fantasy heartbreakers everywhere who have tried.
It's just like D&D, except there's multiple hit locations and damage resistance, and you can have critical wounds where you lose limbs. No thanks.
No thanks. Yeah. So think to all those amateur game hackers and designers and everything, take ideas, and if you're going to if you want to run a tabletop game inspired by Dark Souls, think about what Dark Souls is, think about what can translate and what can't, and just go from there. That would be my advice for that.
I think stealing ideas and concepts and themes is probably easier to implement in an RPG. It's like, oh, this is a game where I push the X button 3 times in a row to disarm a bomb, but maybe in the game I'm like, okay, I just need to add a timed element where they're fighting the cultists, but there's actually a bomb too. That's kind of a cool scene. We got to deal with both things. It's not, I'm going to have them, they have to roll 3 19s in a row to disarm the bomb, but there's just an element of some sort of timed catastrophe that's secondary to the main story or whatever. I think that it's easier to implement themes, ideas, and concepts than it is to like steal a mechanic. But I'm also not a good game designer, so maybe if you're good at it, you can.
Yeah, and I think like going back to like the Dark Souls example, like you might have a really thrilling moment with a boss in Dark Souls, and you're like, wow, how do I translate this to 4 other people at the table? And you might have to look at the elements of what's going on. It's not that, oh, this wasn't interesting because the boss could deal 75% of my HP in one hit. It's interesting because the game let you stumble into something you were not prepared for. That's an idea you can put into tabletop easily. Being able to tease out that's the thing, that's the nugget to take away and to leave the other stuff behind, like I said, and like you said, I think is really the core of like, how do I adapt something?
All right. Very, very cool. So we're at that point, we need to start wrapping up the show. So as always, we'll throw it out one last time to anyone in the audience who would like to send us a question. We'll answer them. Doesn't have to be related to the topic at hand. It could be anything that you just want to ask. Since there is a delay while we're waiting for chat to catch up, Tanner, where can people find your work on the internet?
I run the Shadow of the Cabal podcast. You can find it on iTunes and Google Play and all sorts of other podcast aggregators. We're wrapping up pretty soon, but we're a story about samurai investigators. Jason Bourne meets Seven Samurai meets Game of Thrones. If you like those things, check it out. We're going to be wrapping up our story soon and moving on to something else pretty quickly, like I said. So if you want to keep updated, you can keep subscribed to the podcast feed. We're also on Twitter at SOTCPod, like Shadow of the Cabal. That's the easiest and fastest way to get a hold of me. I always have my phone on me. So if you want to send feedback or whatever, you can do that. And then if you feel extra generous, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/SOTCPod. Kick us a couple bucks a month. You get to pick my brain about stuff. You get access to our super, super fun Discord community that's always active, and I'll run games for you even. So check that out.
Very, very cool. Well, Tanner, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Again, my name is Michael at the RPG Academy on Twitter, on Facebook, on Google+. Anywhere you search RPG Academy, if something comes up, it's probably me, including my new gamer tag. So if you're on Xbox and you want to play games with me, even though I don't play very much multiplayer, I pretty much play stuff on myself. But if I'm in the mood, you can find me RPG Academy, which makes me mad. Let me tell you about this, okay? So for years, I had a gamer tag that was at-home player, which I thought was clever as all get out. I think it's hilarious. It's funny. I loved it.
Okay.
Somehow because I let my Xbox Gold subscription lapse 6 years ago, whatever. So I had to redo everything. I didn't know where anything was, so I wasn't able to get that thing back. So I picked the RPG Academy, and it seemed to work. But then when I went into the Xbox, it didn't change. So I went back to try it again, and then it said the RPG Academy was taken. Apparently by me, but I was caught somewhere in the middle, so my tag is RPG Academy, but not the RPG Academy. But
you lose branding points on that.
I know, it's so aggravating.
Yeah.
But anyway.
I'm on Xbox at Tanner Clausen. If you want to play games with me, I usually play single player games, but if you see me online, feel free to fire in. I'll play something with you.
I mean, let's play Marvel Ultimate Alliance. I called dibs on Deadpool.
I'll be did you ever play the old X-Men arcade game with 6 players?
Yeah, like the actual arcade game.
Yeah. I always liked playing as Colossus because you could just press a button and he just screams and stops the entire game for everybody else. That's what I'll pick up in Ultimate Alliance.
Yeah, my main character is Captain America, and I've given him every upgrade. So like every strike point, body point. So he's inhuman. He's stronger than the Hulk. But Deadpool is actually the best for killing bosses because he has the thing where he pulls out the gun and he just shoots. Like you get the other 3 around the bad guy, and he just goes and he'll kill just about anything in a couple seconds. So,
so stay tuned for more hot tips and game advice for Marvel Ultimate Alliance.
Yes, it looks like New York Tater said he just signed up for patron support. I think he means for us since it's called Sophomore. That's our thing, the Academy. So thank you very much. That's really appreciative. I appreciate it. Target says good night. Can't recommend Monster Hunter World enough.
I'm converted. Alrighty. Thanks so much, guys, for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.
Yep. Thanks. Awkward wave out. Bye.